Today we're going to talk about something fascinating, how a single line written in a legal document could decide the future of one of the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. It's a story where law, nature, and controversy all crash into each other. So take a look at this. This is the Aravalli Range. And it's so much more than just a pretty picture. For millions of people in northwestern India, this is a literal life support system, a green lung in a pretty dry part of the world. Which brings us to the big question, right? How on earth do you protect something this ancient, this massive, and this important from all the threats of the modern world? Well, the answer, and you're not going to believe this, came down to one thing. India's Supreme Court tried to fix the whole problem by officially defining a single word, hill. Yeah, a hill. But to really get why defining a hill is such a huge deal, you first have to understand just how crucial these mountains are. Let's dive into why the Aravallis are this ancient, vital lifeline. First off, let's just try to wrap our heads around the age. We're talking 2 billion years. That's billion with a B. These mountains are one of the oldest systems on the entire planet. They were ancient before the Himalayas even existed. And they're not just old, they're huge. The range stretches for about 800 kilometers. It cuts clear across the country, from Gujarat all the way up through Rajasthan and Haryana, right to the edge of Delhi. But here's the most important part. The Aravallis have a job to do. Think of them as a giant ecological shield. They literally stop the Thar Desert from creeping into fertile farmlands. They act like a massive sponge, soaking up rain and refilling groundwater for a region that's always thirsty. They even shape the monsoon rains and are home to incredible wildlife. We're talking tigers and leopards. But here's the problem. This vital shield has been under attack for a very, very long time. For decades, the Aravallis have been facing this constant barrage of threats that's pushed them to the absolute breaking point. So what's doing the damage? Well, you've got 3 main culprits. There's relentless mining for stone and minerals, a lot of it completely illegal. Then there's unchecked urban sprawl from huge cities. And of course, widespread deforestation that's chopping this ecosystem into tiny fragmented pieces. Now, this isn't a new story. People have been trying to fix this for decades. You had some government limits back in the 90s, but they were barely enforced. Then the Supreme Court stepped in with mining bans in 2009 and again just this year. You can see how it's all been building up, leading to this one big moment. And that brings us right back to the main event, the court's big and very controversial ruling, the one that was supposed to make everything clear, but instead it kicked off a huge debate among scientists and conservationists. So, here it is, the big definition. The Supreme Court decided that from now on, to be legally considered an Aravalli hill, a piece of land has to rise 100 meters or more from the ground around it. Simple, right? A nice, clean number. Except that one simple number has a staggering consequence. 90%. Just let that number hang in the air for a second. Because 90% is the estimated amount of the entire Aravalli ecosystem, the foothills, the valleys, all the lower parts, that actually falls below that new 100-meter line. So with this new rule, 90% of the Aravallis technically aren't Aravalli hills anymore. And this is where you see the huge conflict. On one hand, the court's goal was pretty clear. They wanted a uniform rule to regulate legal mining, because the old blanket bans just pushed everything underground and made illegal mining worse. But the critics, they see a giant loophole. They're saying you can't just ignore the smaller hills and valleys. They're just as vital for stopping the desert and recharging groundwater. They're terrified that by defining 90% of the ecosystem out of legal protection, the court basically opened the floodgates to destroy. So, with the stakes this high, where do we go from here? What happens next for this ancient mountain range? Is there a path forward that can actually work? You know, a report that went to the court really said it best. The Aravalli Range isn't just some geological feature. It's a life support system. Protecting it isn't just about the environment. It's about the economy, it's about water, it's about the survival of the entire region. Now, the good news is the court didn't just drop this definition and walk away. It also ordered some really crucial next steps. There needs to be a real management plan for sustainable mining. The entire ecosystem has to be properly mapped out to find the no-go zones and wildlife corridors. Technology, like drones and satellites, has to be used to finally crack down on illegal mining. And there's a huge need for restoration work to heal the damage that's already been done. And that's the vision, isn't it? A future where science actually guides policy, technology helps enforce the rules, and we're actively working to bring the ecosystem back to health. It's an ambitious plan, for sure, but it's really the only one that tackles the whole problem. So in the end, we're left with this one massive question. The Supreme Court drew a line in the sand, a 100-meter line, to try and bring order to chaos. But is that line going to be a fortress wall that protects what's left of the Aravallis? Or did it just become a starting line for a race to exploit everything that falls just below it, paving the way for a 2 billion-year-old giant to slowly disappear? I guess only time will tell.